Do you find yourself angry and irritable when others don't behave in a way that you want them to? And maybe even just contemplating this question, you feel a little bit of shame about that. I'm going to invite you to stay here and allow this to be in your awareness. Yes, I'm feeling this, but I'm going to sort of pull this apart a little bit about why we experience this. I know this experience very well. It was as I worked with my mentor, Ernest Morrow, that I really discovered the root of this pattern for me. I didn't like to be angry. In fact, I felt that it was wrong. And I tried really hard to keep it under wraps unless I felt justified. And boy, could I feel justified in my anger. These are the reasons. This is why it is. So I get this in my bones. The interesting thing is, most of my clients are also very familiar with this experience. And you may be too. In fact, just yesterday, a client said to me, I notice myself snapping at the dumbest things. And then we got curious, like, And we kind of pulled this apart. So here's what I discovered as I explored my own experience. And there's two elements of anger that I want to talk about today. One is, I need you to be different so I can be okay. So this idea that I need you to be different in order for me to be okay. And number two, our own inner safety rules. So two elements I'm going to talk about. To address the first one, those with a psychology background might readily identify that this pattern of I need you to be different so I can be okay is a marker of codependent relationships. But you know what? I actually prefer to avoid pathologizing this experience because it's so very common. It's so very common. And why is that? Because as children, we learn that it feels safer to attend to others' well-being and happiness over our own. Most of us, including our parents, caregivers, grew up in very similar situations. Their happiness and well-being depended on the okayness of others. So in essence, we come to orient our happiness and safety by taking cues from ourselves externally, by those people in our world. If you're not okay, I'm not okay. In fact, it becomes a self-serving activity for my own happiness to ensure that you're okay. Our happiness and well-being therefore depends on external factors. If these circumstances were different, if life was different, if you were different, then I would be okay. You relating? So this, we come hardwired in so many ways. And that's why I don't like to sort of pathologize this idea of codependent relationships. But the description of codependent, meaning very enmeshed. We get very sort of tied up in each other's experiences rather than being individuals who have our own experiences, and we engage and interact, but your okayness is not dependent on me, and my okayness is not dependent on you. In fact, there's kind of a heavy burden when I expect you to be responsible for my happiness, and vice versa. There's this icky sort of experience of feeling, and you may not even recognize this because it's so darn common. It's how we engage. Organizations behave this way too. This isn't just individuals. So that's this I need you to be different so I can be okay part. The second point, which is our own inner safety rules, which are completely, most often completely unconscious. We don't even know that those rules are there. They feel justifiable, they feel reasonable, but we haven't really identified that we've created them as rules. They remain kind of hidden to us. We build these inner rules to feel safe. It's a way of controlling for the unknown. And if you think about it, in order to be safe, I have to put these rules into place. I actually am creating my own box, my own small space to fit into in order to be safe. This is a safety strategy, a mechanism that we have developed over time to help us feel safe. But it becomes rather restrictive and tight in this box. And even though you might not identify that this is the place, this is some of the work I do with clients where we sort of discover these places. But it's where you're like, actually, I'm done with this. I don't want to live in this restrictive place. This is where we are actually creating our own experience of restriction, of getting in our own way, essentially, of thriving, of moving outside of survival. But if we can't identify it, if we're not aware of it, we can't identify it. And then because it's a safety issue, there's going to be fear when we stop, when we relax those rules, there's going to be fear. So that's another whole other thing to talk about. But let's get back to the rules. So, these rules that we've created inside of us to feel safe that we're not aware of, the problem is we learn how to avoid bumping into those rules. We keep a distance from them. We organize our life so we don't bump into our own rules because it's uncomfortable. But others don't know about our rules. And so they inadvertently bump up against our rules. And what does that do for us? Deep inside, it feels unsafe. And bang, we're triggered. But all of this is happening under the surface. All we know is we're pissed off, angry. Something isn't right. We feel annoyed. We feel irritated. Some version of on the anger spectrum. We're triggered. So here's the thing. When I feel this spark, whether it's irritation, frustration, anger, rage, it's a messenger for me to get curious about what's actually happening for me. And there's a couple of places to look. One is, where am I not attending to my own happiness? Where am I making you, another, life, circumstances responsible for my own happiness? Where am I not choosing me? When I choose from the truth of who I am, and I've got me here, I can respond with this clarity of my truth. It feels solid. I don't second guess it. I can make choices. I'm choosing how to respond as opposed to being triggered. I feel safe. The second area that I look into is there a rule that I've created that I'm not aware of, that I've created that you've inadvertently exposed for me by bumping up against it? So these are two things that we can get curious about when we feel angry is, where am I not having my own back here? I'm leaving myself behind somewhere. I am not creating my own sense of safety. How can I bring more of me, my truth to this situation? Take ownership and responsibility. Say, actually, here's what's true for me. And second of all is, where does this expose a rule maybe there's a rule here that I am not aware of, that this anger is telling me about. Somebody's bumped up against a rule of mine. And can I use these questions to explore inside of me about what is happening here? Anger doesn't feel good, really. We don't really like to feel angry. There's a certain energy about it, and sometimes it feels better than being depressed or crying. But really, it's not an emotion that we love. We would rather experience joy and happiness, right? So by having less anger in our lives, by being less triggered, we get to enjoy our lives more. So by being aware, it can change so much about our relationships. When we're not being pissed off and angry and frustrated and irritable with the people in our lives, they're not getting that resonance either, right? They're like, oh, and they don't feel like, oh, I'm wearing this heavy something that is expecting, that you're expecting me to be responsible for your happiness. So it changes the relationships. And of course, when we take responsibility for our own happiness and our rules, we bring the locus of our experience inside of us. We are not any longer looking to external things for our sense of okayness, for our sense of happiness. We can turn here and choose and make choices from the truth of who we are. So these two things are beautiful questions, and ones that I use and ones that I, share with my clients as we explore the topic of anger, or on the spectrum of anger, irritation, irritability, frustration, rage, and use them as messengers. I would love to hear from you. If you have had an experience with anger, if this resonates, if you have questions, respond. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you, what your experience with anger has been. Okay, I hope you have a great day. Happy Thursday. And I look forward to hearing from you.